Philosophers talk to our times. A natural history of myddle. Brief meditation on myddle in another. Philosophy has a strange relationship with that myddle that for many years was one that defined attributes or internal intuitions. The sense that I am always in the middle of another, that to be existing is to be caught up in something else, be it the attribute of extension or space-time, is always to be caught up in the wider world. But philosophy long ago lost control of that wild, wide world, as natural philosophy shifted into hard science. So much so that by the beginning of the 20th century, obviously, philosophy even lost control of that special dominion that it felt was peculiarly its own. Time, I mean. That inner sense that made philosophy triumph in the end over natural science and be the king of reason. The profound shock of Einstein's move to annex time to physics, to make it something not merely a blank canvas, the wound-up tick-tock of a clock, and to move it even beyond entropy and the direction the universe runs, is of course deep within philosophy. In a sense, Heidegger is, in Being in Time, restitching philosophy's claim to time, its claim to understand being in the middle of another. Now, in a previous incarnation of this work, I think I spent about 50 pages talking about Heidegger and Being in Time. But that was a long time ago. My notes are written in broad dyslexes. And anyway, I long ago had an Augenblick and realised that life's too short for Heidegger, particularly Being in Time. Wonderful book as it is. I think even I've got rid of my copy. So I would rather approach, I think these days, what it is to exist in the middle in another direction. Through that philosopher who is perhaps most able to understand it, most able to grasp it, and yet spends an entire philosophical career excluding it from the very possibility of existence, almost entirely, and yet at the end can't resist reintroducing it, just a bit in the joke. That philosopher is, of course, Leibniz. Leibniz, of all other philosophers, is the man who could probably understand the world of physics, the world of being in the middle in another, better than almost everyone else. He was, after all, the co-founder of differentiation. He understood how forces imply a world removed from simple modes, how effectively they break Spinoza, in that the things are no longer relations of motion and rest, but rather they're the differential relation of force, and they're the integral relation of energy, and that the conservation of energy and the conservation of momentum are clear different things, highly linked, highly complementary, caught up within the symmetries of the universe, but distinct, things apart. And yet, Leibniz refuses to believe in the actual physical reality of that world that he has uncovered, the physical reality of energy. For him, it bears testimony that substance is other than the world, and that the force, as it is not linked to a causal chain, but rather to the internal dynamics of that which moves, so that it always moves by its own account, is something apart from the universe. And why? Well, Leibniz himself says if it wasn't for the monad, Spinoza would be right. But it isn't really Spinoza, because his own forces of motion have broken Spinoza's simple existence, a belief in essence, and replaced it with a world of energy at one level and force on the other. I don't think it's Spinoza that Leibniz is so scared of, so much as becoming some sort of proto-Nietzsche. A world where monads have the power to actually act, have the force and the energy to act, where matter in some senses is interlocking hidden forces, caught up, moving it hither and thither, in which our perceptions occur, in which our perceptions are merely a move. One of the ways I understand always Deleuze is that he is trying to get at that philosopher that lives rent-free in Leibniz's mind, that is an incarnation, an avatar of Spinoza. Not the Spinoza of ethics, but the Spinoza inside Leibniz. A Spinoza that is so prevalent that although he says, I haven't read ethics in many years, as an old man, he can still critique somebody's use of Spinoza accurately with incredible levels of detail. That philosopher then that haunts Leibniz, which would be his philosophy understood in the middle, in another. And so what does Leibniz do? He tries to hold down all the various, and I've said before, 5 philosophical classic middle positions. He holds down 4 of them in order to try to free himself from the fear of being in the middle in another. So what does he do? Well, first of all, Leibniz, even more probably than Berkeley, although Berkeley is easier to understand initially, is the master of understanding what it means to be creative in the middle of another. What else is a perception but something in the middle of appetite? What else is appetite but caught up in perceptions? And the two form a vast tempest. Leibniz again and again uses it, like the single notes of an orchestra whose sound is endlessly sweeping them away. Or we might say it was a field where everything is only existing in terms of absolutely everything else, always caught up in the middle of another, always reflecting that other. Until they build together patterns, tunes, an overall soundscape that's more like a desert wind or the endless beat of waves than it is anything distinct, and yet for all that has its own sound, a sound then that is always in the middle of another, of all the movements that it has. And the monad sits and pulls out this endless tempest from within it, as they all exist in the middle of the monad, etc. It is a huge testimony, a moment in which what it is to be caught up inside everything else, part of everything else, becomes incarnate. But crisscrossing this endless world of perception, of counter-perception, of minutest perceptions, one of the interesting things I have to quickly say about Leibniz, and one of the ways I think he is trying to exclude the middle in another, is that he doesn't use, as far as I know, the obvious terminology. He talks about minutest perceptions and minutest appetites, and it is impossible to not understand them as differentials. Okay, but he never uses the terminology. He never says dy by dp or dy by dA. He never, therefore, understands them straightforwardly as differentials. He doesn't do it. And I think it's probably partly because he's avoiding thinking the world that would imply, which would imply that they are external to the monad. Or at least very external. I think they would imply it was external to the monad. It would imply that they're in a separate world. It's also that Leibniz is very aware that these are multiple differential equations, so that one minutest perception is in relation to myriad other appetites and myriad other perceptions, and so you can't hold it down as a simple dy by dx. It would be dy by dx dz to z. It would be a differentiation with multiple terms, which the maths to do that is only just coming online, so he avoids it. It's just a point in passing. But anyway, crisscrossing the stormy world of the middle of another is, of course, the middle for another. And Leibniz is the king of understanding how one event affects another event. How if Caesar does not cross the Rubicon, then Christ cannot be crucified. And if Christ cannot be crucified, the world cannot be redeemed, and Beelzebub wins. How one event then, one singular point, exists not in itself, but rather for all the rest, catching them up within it, catching them up within its power, so that Sextus, becoming a good man, is to live in a world that is incompossible with ours, a world that is almost identical up to that point, and yet, at the last moment pulls away. Each event then presents itself not as a simple thing, as it is in itself, but rather as that pivot around which all other events move. And Leibniz, and here Deleuze is totally right, hollows out, understands, comprehends. That's the set of incompossible worlds. Oh, he has to hold it down to say that only one exists. And why? Because he is avoiding, even here, the conception of being in the middle in another. He doesn't want to have a world independent from the monads. And to do that, he has to hold down the capacity that he invents for the middle for another. He has to hold it down and say, well, only one of these exists, because we exist and the world exists and everything is kind of caught up within each other. And so its singularity must be because there's one best world. But I'm going to come back to that. And then in the world of matter, as he classically understands it, is clearly always a middle through another. He says, after all, the body is merely a heap. It's nothing in itself. There is no reality in matter. And he uses the middle through another to totally rubble the concept of the physical world, of the world of space. It doesn't really exist. It's merely an epiphenomena. As what it is has exterior material existence is only understood through the middle through another. That other being perception and being the monad, but also being the way the monad, being the way that causes naturally occur in the world. A cause is that which expresses the largest number of moves in a single idea. It is the idea in which they are, which gathers them up, in which they are expressed through. It is the physical world then becomes understood in the middle through another. Never something in itself, never real, never actual, and yet something necessary, something the monad has to grasp the world through. It doesn't see the world of monads, it only sees the physical world. So that it sees the world through matter, and matter only exists through the monad. But it is on the next of the middles that Leibniz starts to very explicitly makes his move, and that's the middle with another. And he repeats it earlier. It's a prequel to Berkeley's position, but it is the standard position in philosophy. If philosophy wants to restrict the middle with another, if it doesn't really want to think about the myriad other voices in the universe, if it wants to somehow hold down matter to make it less troubling, and hold down our relationship with the world to make it straightforward, to make the fact that we appear in our own minds to live in a single universe full of other things, simple and obvious, it always holds down the middle with another to a relationship with God. Because God is the ultimate get-out clause. God's unity founds the unity of God's mind founds the unity of the universe, so that the two are given one in the other. And the troublesome aspects of being in the middle in another, that is, being part of space and time, flesh and blood, mortal, soulless, can be occluded, an identity saved through our relationship with one single great with an, in brackets, other, meaning of course God. And of course Berkeley, just as much as Berkeley, Leibniz therefore hypothesizes a God who is very much with us, with our minds, understands that as we do, creates the world of reason as we would. He is that great with, then, our pal in the sky, who made the world, the cosmic mind. And yet, this act of occlusion surely doesn't really work. Just pointing it out. Leibniz uses each monad's relationship with God to found the necessary existence of all other monads, because a God would want to create the maximum amount of perfect universes, a maximum amount of perfection, as is implied by reason, and therefore the maximum amount of stuff. But he also uses it as the axis which will allow you to explain that sense we have of being in the middle in another, that is, in one particular universe, as that God has created the single universe. But that's because Leibniz is kind of hiding that relationship with. I always have a relationship with one God, just me and God. And yet, why would God need to create only one universe? Any infinite mind could create a perfect universe for each individual monad, and surely the sheer press of multiple universes would make the world better. It is because Leibniz is holding down the with relationship, the troubling aspect of being with another, which means that you're never in total control. Even God wouldn't be in total control, because if he was genuinely listening to the other monads, he would create each one their own perfect universe. The universe then where Sextus is a good man, but also our own is one where for each one of us, for various different reasons, Sextus is an evil man. Leibniz can't make that move. He can't make the move to myriad universes, each good for the particular monad, because he doesn't really want that with relationship to be a genuine with relationship. He doesn't want it to be genuinely problematic. That deep problem that humans have to understand that the universe is full of other things, non-humans. The universe, I mean also the earth. All those withs you have to think about, all those animal eyes watching you and thinking the universe differently. Leibniz doesn't really want to worry about all of them. He wants to have it all in terms of a single universe, a single God, a single relationship, a single with. And why? Because it is that with relationship, that fact that God wants to creates one universe, and that will allow him to explain the sense we have of all being caught up in the middle in another. It is because God has created the one universe. Matter isn't real. It's morality that is real. The morality of a divinity that, for reasons that are not clear, because he doesn't really believe in the genuine with, has created the one universe. And so Leibniz cocks up the with in order to make it also take the position of the in. And yet, being a wonderful mind who can't resist fiddling, he doesn't really do that, does he? Because in a late series of letters written almost tongue-in-cheek to a Jesuit, the De Bos letters, which are critical in Deleuze's understanding of Leibniz, but fascinatingly are almost left out of are marginalised, I'm going to put it like that, in the classic Cambridge reader of Leibniz. And said, you've got to remember, Leibniz doesn't really believe in these theories. He works out a theory of the body. A theory of body in terms of, chains of reason. In terms of a body that can contain all elements of the universe within it. A body that is matter. And matter is the citizen of all possible universes as he creates it in the De Bos letters. And so he creates a wonderful theory of matter where God wouldn't need to create different matter if he created a different sextus. It would be the same matter. So he creates matter that has a wider possibility of existence than the actual monads. And he does it because he's trying to work out a way of accounting for transubstantiation to please the boss. Leibniz is a Protestant. He doesn't believe particularly in transubstantiation. So you have to understand this is a very queer idea within Leibniz. But it is an idea of a body that is kind of enmeshed in the middle of the universe. But in the course of these letters, he makes a very remarkable argument that is harking straight back to the middle with another position. He says that matter and morality are caught in the same thing, that the oneness of matter is a testimony to morality. And so he seeks to found the being in the middle in another, the sense that we're all caught up within each other, only within the morality of God's existence, which was held down in a relationship to middle with another. It's not convincing. Leibniz isn't convinced about it himself, I don't think. That's why it's all a bit tongue-in-cheek. But he ends up creating bodies that could exist in multiple different universes, so that in some senses are greater than the monads that are meant to create them. And also having to make an explicit claim linking morality with materiality. A claim that I personally find endlessly productive, because it's rather fun trying to work out the way that materiality and morality are one and the same. It allows you to rethink the nature of morality, and yet is awkward in his own argument, because it is based on a relationship in the middle with God. A middle which is awkward because God is always saying, well, I kind of listen to you, but only a little bit, Sextus. You're going to be evil after all. And so what Leibniz presents is how you can have to twist an entire, if you want to exclude, except for a joke at the end, one of the middle positions, you have to pull your entire philosophy around. How you have to distort and augment in order to create a single narrative that's capable of understanding a world.